right, everybody, welcome to the Fathersphere. What is the Fathersphere? The Fathersphere is a place where dads can come and get encouraged to be better dads. And when I say better dads, I don't mean perfect dads. I just mean we're a team of dads that get together and we talk about how we can be better dads, things we can do to be better dads.
BDEs.
That's right.
Best dads ever.
That's right. Not perfect, though.
Not perfect.
That's the deal. Mm-hmm. So no perfectness allowed. So we're glad you're here listening in. Today, I wanted to highlight and talk about the challenge of raising boys. And the title of this podcast is called Made in My Image. Now, you've probably heard from past podcasts. I have 3 girls, so this is a foreign space for me. I don't know. I don't know what it's like to raise boys. The closest thing I got was my nephew, who was an incredible dude. He still is, and I love him a lot. But when he was growing up, his folks, my brother and my sister-in-law, they worked, and so we got to watch him a lot. And I loved all the energy he had and the fun we had together. So that was the closest thing I got. But I wasn't his dad, so I am not qualified to discuss or talk about or even have the experiences of challenges with boys. I know. Yeah. I know. Crickets. So, however, I have someone that I'm really excited to have on the show today. He's a personal friend of mine. I met him, 8-10 years ago. He was a mentor of mine in a business that I joined for a little bit and did for a while. And we had a great time together, really looked up to him in business, and he actually did this business with one of his boys and really enjoyed his son. He has older boys now, but my guest today is Mr. Darrin Howell. Darrin, thanks for being on the show.
You're welcome. Glad to be a part of it.
Yeah, we have fanfare for you right now.
I love it.
Being on the show. So, Darrin, tell us a little bit about yourself and kind of where you came from, what you're all about, how many boys you had, and just give us your history a little bit.
Sounds good. Thank you, Chris. And again, I'm honored to be on this show, and I think what you guys are doing with this podcast as far as fathering, I think is awesome. I think that there's an awful lot of need out there for direction amongst young families today. Any hints and ideas from anybody you can hear from, I think would be quite an asset. But and I got to give it back to Chris. When I first met Chris, we were instant friends, and I'm going to say we're going on probably about 10 years now, and we had a similar sense of humor, and for some reason we just got along no matter where we were at, and we've gotten together in not only different cities in Wisconsin, but also some other states. And I've always enjoyed you, Chris.
Yeah, same here, Darrin.
Yeah, you bet. And what you guys, the two of you are doing together, I'm really excited. But anyways, I'm 53 years old. I grew up in Madison, or I was born in Madison, but I really grew up in Milwaukee. We moved there when I was about 10 years old, and that's where I had my first paper routes, and I grew up on the north side of Milwaukee, and kind of part of a neighborhood that got, worse and worse as time went on, and it was a bit challenging to grow up there in my later teen years, but I'm so thankful for it because I think it probably toughened me up a little bit and also gave me a desire someday when I had my family that I didn't have to raise them in the city. So I eventually I got married to, one of my schoolmates who was my best friend's sister, who was a few years younger than us. And along the way, we had 3 wonderful sons, Levi, Lucas, and Logan, and we knew right away when we started having kids, and when Logan was about 1 year old, we moved out of the city and moved out in the country. We moved north. We moved into the Poinet in Rio, Wisconsin area, and then eventually bought more land and moved into the Baraboo, between Baraboo, Wisconsin, Dells. And I truly raised all three of our boys. And I've always been self-employed, owning my own construction companies and landscape businesses. And I always enjoyed working for myself. And during a bad economy, there was a couple other avenues that I did along with you, Chris, and learned an awful lot. So
yeah,
always enjoyed being self-employed. Always enjoyed being with my sons and raising my sons. And like you said, I've been working with Levi, my oldest, and looking forward to continue working with him.
Yeah. And you, with your companies that you had throughout the years, I mean, you had your boys working with you too, right?
Yep. Whenever, whatever I did around the house and out in the country, or whether it was cutting firewood or remodeling, I always let them be a part of what we were doing. And so they've always, worked. I always wanted them to have other jobs too, because I wanted them to not just answer to me, but I wanted them to be accountable to other bosses and stuff. So they've all had their own little separate careers, and then Levi eventually started in with me, and we've been together ever since.
How cool. I've told some people this in the past, but I love that about you and your boys working together. My dad and I, and it was all me, but my dad and I just never could work together that well. And it was mainly my issue with because my dad was always trying to be a teacher, which is appropriate, and always trying to encourage me. But for some strange reason, I just kind of always took it like, hey, I can do this. You think I can't do this? And I don't know why I ever did that. I don't have that attitude now. But when I was a kid, for some reason, I just felt like that way. And so my dad and I never worked together. It was all me, not my dad. And I regret that. So that's one thing I really respect. I know Levi, I know the best, but I always respected that about Levi and being able to work with you and you guys working together. That's so cool.
Thank you.
So, Darrin, give me your best thing about raising boys. You had just a gaggle of boys. You outnumbered mom in the house. What was the coolest thing about having boys?
I think probably the coolest thing about it, there's an automatic comfort level that you have raising boys, because you once were a young boy, and you got to kind of jump right into something that you once were with them. And probably the coolest, greatest thing is that you now had your new up and coming best friends that you can hunt with, fish with, work with, and laugh with and cry with. And so I just think that was the neatest thing about having the three sons.
That is so cool. Yeah. And you've barely grown up yourself. So it was just like hanging out with the friends.
That's right. We all grew up together.
I'm with you. My wife says, "Oh, honey, you're getting old." I said, "Well, I don't know who you're talking to. I refuse to get old."
Absolutely.
Exactly. It's more fun that way. All right. So friends growing up, and I totally get the boy thing. Sometimes when boys come over, and I was a weird dad with girls. I mean, I wrestled them. I got them into like superheroes, and really that story is hilarious because I was walking through Blockbuster one day, and they're bringing me the newest Barbie movie, and I'm looking at it and I'm thinking to myself, if I gotta watch one more of these Barbie movies, I'm gonna puke. And so we're kind of walking up to check it out. I'm dating myself, but people don't go to Blockbuster. They don't go to any, they stream it all, right? But I'm walking up and I see this Justice League video, and I'm like, oh my gosh, girls, come here. And I'm spinning the tail of just telling them the story of Justice League, and I'm like, oh, and this is Superman, and this is what he does, and this is Wonder Woman, and and these guys get together and they fight evil, and oh my gosh, and they're like, their eyes are getting as big as saucers, and I'm like, do you want to watch this? And they're like, yeah, Dad, yeah, we want to watch that. Okay, put this Barbie movie back. And I dodged a bullet. But so they, to this day, they still love superhero movies. So that was my exodus of anything Barbie and entrance into yay, my little superhero girls. So what would you say was kind of the hardest, worst, toughest thing about raising boys?
I think, probably one of the toughest things is learning how to remember that they're not you, I had to constantly remind myself that they're not me. And by doing that, I was, the second to the youngest. There's 4 boys in my family, growing up. And, so I got to see a lot of, great things and burdens and mistakes from my older brothers that were quite a bit older than me. And so I had to really learn that I needed, Levi being the first and eventually Lucas and Logan. I had to really learn to let them be, who they are meant to be, and that they weren't me. They didn't have to be just like me. So I'm going to say that was probably, one of the hardest things to learn how to do. But one thing I never will feel bad about is teaching them how to work and have work ethic. And, so I've always enjoyed not telling them what to do, but doing it with them. I see so many young fathers today, trying to find success and helping their son's mind, when sometimes they forget that it's easier to teach them how to mind if you can do those tasks with them. You prove a couple things when you do that. You prove that you can work alongside them, and you're humble enough to do it with them, but you're also teaching them that it can be accomplished. And it's instilling in them that it doesn't have to be hard to do. It can be fun to do. And so that all 3 of my boys are very hard workers. But probably one of the hardest things with the 3 sons was learning who they really are, and learning to let go of who I thought I wanted them to be, but just encourage them to make the good decisions and the right decisions along the way.
Very cool. That's good advice. It's funny because I said in another podcast talking about girls, that it's kind of new territory for me, right? And I had made the statement, I think my wife is harder on my girls because they're little versions of her. Mm-hmm. And when they're doing stuff, she wants them to be better versions of her. And when they're doing stuff that she considers not as good of a version, or like, hey, she cracks down a lot harder. Me, I'm like, I don't know. I was never a girl. I don't know what that entails.
It's an easy out.
Yeah, exactly. And so I'm kind of like, they act a certain way, and I just think, well, that's how girls act, I guess, But because Mom was a girl once, she knows what's, and she's refined herself over the years, and she wants them to be that. So I think that's a really good thing you pointed out in saying, you have to remind yourself, hey, they're not me. They're not going to be like me. And the differences could be a better version of me, but we got to give them space to be that,
Yeah, that's so true. Give them a reason, by working as hard as them, working with them. So someday they don't have to be you, but give them things that they would want to be like you.
Yep. I like that. And I think it fosters a deeper connection with each other too. I know with with my kids and having that space that I give them, there's some things that they are probably a little harder on mom, on the girl side of the house than me in that way. So I think that's very smart how you raised your boys, and I can see it in your boys. I mean, they have a lot of respect. They love their dad a lot. I'm sure there's horror stories that I don't know, but at least from what I understand,
there's plenty of boys.
So I was kind of hunting around. There's some sites that I go to. One site that I kind of stumbled across over the past week was a site called allprodad.com. And if anyone listening out there, they have a lot of great articles about just being a dad. And they have a very similar mission like we do, just about, they have just other dads kind of feeding into this site. But I found one, Darrin, that it was titled "The Challenges of Raising a Boy." So I wanted to litmus test it a little bit and compare notes and see what you thought. I think they've got a couple of things here, but I'll throw a few out and we'll see if you agree with it. So the first one that they talk about is that boys have a need for physical activity. What do you think about that?
I totally believe in that. Absolutely.
What kind of physical activity were your boys into?
Never really sports. They probably were, not the most physical kids in school, but they were kids that didn't get to come home, grab a bowl of sweet cereal and turn on the TV. They were boys that maybe came home to a few chores and earned, some TV time, but very little TV. So they had probably no choice but to get physical. But they didn't grow up with a lot of TV, so they didn't really know what they were missing. But I think that the three of my boys might be a bit different because of that. So they required and desired to more physical things, to go out and run in the fields, to go out and maybe check their traps that they set for wildlife and just other things, and building things and making things and creating things, and so they just all three of my boys just had a desire to be physical.
Well, that almost plays into the next one that they said is let them be wild. So just, let them do some dangerous stuff and, because boys dig that stuff. I remember doing dangerous stuff all the time.
I like that. I like that statement. Let them be wild, because as a young man, I was pretty wild. I think to date, I've owned about 99 vehicles. I used to love to work on, engines and make my cars and motorcycles and go-karts faster. But I remember wanting Levi when he was younger. I wanted to restrict him. I didn't want him to be wild. I didn't want him to get hurt. I didn't want him to risk his life. But I had a mentor of mine that I had grew up around. He was a youth pastor in one of the churches we went to. And I was telling him, the expert dad that I was trying to be, and Levi wasn't even 2 years old yet. And he says, I'm going to teach you something. I said, what? And he says, don't take his fire away. And I said, what do you mean? I said, well, Wayne said to me, when he wants to run, let him run with him. When he wants to go faster, go faster. When he wants to dive off of a little higher, dive, into the water, let him do it. Let him be wild. And I was so thankful for that early on advice. And that's why I think it's great what you guys are doing, because you're offering advice and tips to help people along the way. Yeah, I agree. Let them be wild.
That's cool. And I know this next one is something that, when we were doing business together, I remember you mentoring me and just the drive to succeed. That's the next one that they said. They said most boys desire to accomplish some kind of quest or challenge, and this is just encouraging them to drive or succeed. And I know from my mentorship with you, that is a big one because you're one of the hardest workers I know. And I mean, how did you encourage that in your boys?
I think probably one of the highest key points in wanting them to succeed, probably one of the most important golden rules to that is to never allow them to settle into the statement that doesn't work. I can't find it. I don't know. So those when my kids would come up to me, when my boys would come up to me and says, I can't find that, or that won't work. I tried it and it didn't happen. I at that point put my nose to the grindstone and I did that with them, or I failed with them. I think if you want to lunge forward, with the success of your son, I think you really need to, and this will also help every dad learn how to do things through failure with their kids, is when they say something can't be done, show them that it can't be done, or work together on it, until you both fail at it, and then find a better way. That's the beautiful thing about the options that we have today with YouTube and different things. We can truly do anything. So I think giving them the courage, but being willing to work with them in a positive forward motion, instead of saying, you're right, it doesn't work. You're right, we can't find it. And I think I always looked at it because Levi, Lucas, and Logan, they were all three different.
Right.
If you sent Logan out to get something out in the barn or the garage, if it was a 9/16 socket, Lucas, he'd go out there and look until he found it. And if he couldn't find it, he'd run to the store and go buy one. So he had it.
Wow.
Logan, he would maybe make compromises, make something else work. Levi was one who he'd go out and glance, come back in and say, I can't find it. He was the hardest to break. So for years, I would walk Levi back out and go find it, and you can create a monster that way as well, because I think he got so used to me showing him, or working with him to find it, that I never really set him free to make it. Now that we work construction together, it's it's making a full circle.
Right.
He knows where everything is, and I got to ask him.
Does he walk you out and help you find it now?
Come on, here it is, Dad. It was right out in front of you.
Dad. Man, I know this trick.
Yeah.
I used to do it. You said something that I think is super cool. Now, my dad, and probably in a very different stage and very different place in life, but when I kind of had kids and I got to this place where I realized that my dad had, when you talk about courage, my dad was a hard worker. My dad loved the family and worked very hard to provide for our family. My dad did the best he could and with what he knew how. But my dad basically went from managing, and this will date my dad, he was an electronics repair guy. So back in the day, JCPenney's had a repair department, laid him off 3 months before his pension kicked in. And then we moved to this small little town, lived in a very small trailer, and he had to work, make money in his 50s, making boats, fiberglass boats. He's working with 20-year-olds, making boats for $6 an hour. Right. So he goes from, so there's this thing that made him very cautious, and probably I don't want to say to a fault, but just the circumstances brought him to this place where he's like, you know what, I've got a family, we're making a go of it here. And, he was just very cautious, and I felt like I lost out on a lot of courage things that you've instilled in your boys. And I had to kind of later on in life learn that. And I think that's a lot of what probably attracted me to you and being mentored by you in our business. I liked how you made it fun, how you're just like, hey, you know what? It could happen, but get out there and let's do this. Let's go do it. So I think that's really cool. And I think that's really critical for boys. Big time is encouraging them to have courage. So there was another thing in this article that's talked about making an emotional connection with boys, because it said that boys tend to have a harder time getting in touch with what's going on below the surface. Doesn't help when they have an emotional response, like breaking down and crying or something. They see it as weakness. So is that something that was tough for you? Is that something that you did with your boys? I mean, how did you deal with emotions when they came up as young men?
You know what? That's a great question, because it's something I'm sometimes convicted about that today, about how I was back then. Because I was, not that I was a hard guy, but I was a tough guy, meaning I had a huge pain tolerance. It was easy for me to say, toughen up, get through it. So I had to learn how to help them deal with emotions, probably later in life, more than I did when they were young. When we got hurt, when we were little, Mom always hugged us, and Dad rubbed dirt into it, so we if there was one area that I could have learned to be a better dad with, I'm so excited to share this with my boys, my 3 sons, because we talk about it all the time. I wish I would have got more into their emotions and understood their emotions, and let them be more emotional. And not that I wasn't a bad guy in any way to them that way, but especially today, and especially to be in a relationship with their spouses, or spouses someday. I got 2 of them married now, 1 left. But being able to understand not only their own emotions, but understand other people's emotions, just would make relationships much more strong. So, yeah, absolutely. Being able to cut down through that crust and learn, what their emotions are like, and being able to understand each other would make a lot better father and son relationship. I think I had a 9 out of 10 with my boys, but there's always room for improvement when you look back on it.
Right. My mom said one time that dads need to be vulnerable with their boys. And I thought that was really good, because there's a lot of times, and you even said it earlier about, you said something about how, letting your boys, or how did you word it? Basically letting them be okay to fail. It's okay. Let's learn from it.
With them.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's huge, because a lot of times I know my dad, he was this old Brooklyn Jew, right? And, he would always say, like, what's the matter with you? And get on me about stuff. And my mom would be just like, well, next time he says that, just say nothing, Dad, and then move on, But, my dad was a tough guy too. And I just, he always had different things going on with his emotions, but he just was never good about talking about it. And I really learned that from my mom more than my dad. I think I'm a little bit better in touch. Maybe having 3 girls has something to do with it too. But
you bet, I can imagine.
yeah. So anyway, I think that's a really cool thing that you said, hey, failure is just a part of life. It's okay. I do it. We all do it. And here's the deal. We learn from it and move on. And that goes right along with courage too. A failure doesn't mean you're done and you're not a man and, all this stuff. It just means, we're going to learn and do it better next time.
The greatest courage is built through failure.
Yeah. All right, Darrin. So I'm on the girls' side of this one, but I got to know. So the last one that they talk about is raising boys in a hyper-sexualized culture. Now, I was once a young man, and I'll give you the girls' side, the girls' dad perspective. I had my wife was one that said, "Oh, he's a nice boy," and I said, "You know what, honey, I was a nice boy, but I know what rolled through my head." And I may have been, and my dad was an old school gentleman. I mean, you open doors for ladies, you don't, you treat them nice. I mean, I grew up in the age where it's slap butt Fridays and they would slap girls on the butt. I didn't do that stuff because my dad would have read me the riot act on that. And so my dad was really old school. But, I knew what rolled through my head. I don't even hate boys for it. I know that's just part of growing up. But I have a healthy distrust for boys with girls. And I've even told my younger two, I said, Morgan, I let off easy. But you guys, when the boys come over, I bought this Spartan sword that I'm going to be sharpening, as they come in the door. I might strap up with some of my pistols I own, whatever. I just want this healthy fear. I don't want them too comfortable. So that's the girls' side. But how did you raise your boys for dating?
I think probably the greatest asset that we can bind into our relationships with our sons nowadays is having respect for the opposite sex. Mm-hmm. I think the decline of respecting a female in general has gone way haywire. There's not a lot of value on women anymore, and you see not only with dress code today, but with whether it's TV, radio, a dirty joke, and whatever else is out there. It could be an album cover, could be anything. But I had a huge appetite to help my sons respect ladies, respect women. And I think that's because I grew up in the inner city where there wasn't any respect for women.
Right.
The respect that you did see though was a premium respect, old school respect, where they did open the door for their wives, and they did talk to their wives properly, and so, we're in a hypersexual era, where, anything goes, anything can be said. But if there's a task at hand for all fathers today, it is teach our young boys and eventually young men how to respect the girls and how to respect, because they're precious human beings created by God, and they need to be respected. And it's funny how you can take a young lady who grew up in a non-respected environment, and when you give her respect, she then learns how to require and admire and desire respect. So I think, in the society that we've allowed into our nation today and into our homes and into our societies is, our greatest task is to bring, respect back. I always wanted my boys to see me open the door for their mother. I always wanted them to see, 2-3 times a week, me bring her a flower or two or a cappuccino, maybe a little note before I left for a job site at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, and I got to see so little of that growing up that I really desired for them to see that that was achievable and possible, and it worked.
Yeah.
The boys, you've met all three of my sons, and it's they're gentlemen because they had to be. But everybody's can require something out of their boys. Every father can require something out of their boys, but you have to live it. You have to be who you want them to be. You have to show them and prove them, because they will be you, good or bad.
Right. Yeah. My wife's dad always had a saying. He said, just do what I say, don't do what I do. And I'm like, well, that doesn't work. That doesn't work at all. You have to model it.
Yeah, you have to model it.
Yeah. I mean, I learned it from you. Okay. It's really what it is. I mean, you were a picture of manhood to your sons, and they're watching what you do. And so seeing you honor and respect their mom that's a big deal. I mean, they're going to model that when they get older.
We did a podcast on that.
Yeah. Yep.
Yep.
Yeah.
Exciting.
I was going to say, I think that's so cool that you did that. When I started dating my wife, I remember, I would try to open the door for her in the car. Like, we'd pull up somewhere, mm-hmm. and I'd get out and I'd come around the car, and she's like out of the car, shut the door. And I'm like, hey, we're on a date. I'm going to get the door for you. She's like, why? I can get the door. And I'm like, look, it's just, you're a lady. I want to treat you like a lady. Just be pampered a little bit. Okay. I'm being chivalrous. And so even to this day, when we're on a date, I have to be like, hey, stay here. And get out of the car and walk around and open the door.
Put a combination on the seatbelt.
Yeah, right. Exactly. The seatbelt doesn't come out until you open the door from the outside. I have to put child locks on the passenger door.
That's awesome.
So, Darrin, I love how you were intentional. I think that is so important. Just on how you wanted to raise your boys, how you wanted to model it for them. I think that is so important. What advice would you have for dads that might be struggling with their boys? Maybe it could be anything from, hey, I'm expecting my boys to be like me, or maybe it's some value that they just don't feel like their boys are getting. I know you've had one of your boys has had some trouble and gone through some rough spots. What advice would you give to dads? What encouragement would you give to dads that might be struggling with one of their boys, or maybe all of their boys, or just raising boys?
I think a key point, and you mentioned my youngest, he was my rebel, even though I did, I tried to do all the same things the same way with all of them. But that doesn't mean they're all going to get it right away, and so I've had to learn so much just in the last, 5, 6, 7 years. I've learned to channel through and come out of losing everything in a business, eventually losing a marriage of 28 years, but then also have one of my sons go through some challenging times, and I've had to learn how to love back through all that stuff, but probably one of the greatest, pieces of advice I can give to a father today is to be vulnerable, like you said, Chris. I think to be vulnerable with them, you will now take them and learn how to fish if you never went fishing before. To be vulnerable with them means that you might go out there and throw a football with them, even though you never played football. Change a tire on the car. You got to learn to do the things that you've never done. You gotta get outside the box, be vulnerable with them, experiment with them. You will not only acquire a son that is capable of doing more things, you'll acquire a bond and a friendship, because you're learning how to fail together, to succeed together. And truly, my dad worked his tail off my whole life. My dad wasn't around a lot, but he worked. I never have ever seen anybody that could outwork my dad. Desired to work, loved to work, and I will never ever say anything negative about my dad being gone and working all the time, because he gave me work ethic. So one of the greatest things you can give your sons is work ethic. And it's not by saying get out there and clean that garage. It's cleaning the garage with them. If you can do things with them, accomplish things together, and sometimes not just 8 hours a day, but maybe 9 or 10 or 12 hours a day on a Saturday or a Sunday. But you've got to instill work ethic. Even if you don't have a lot of work ethic, learn work ethic. Teach yourself how to have work ethic, but do it with your kids. Take your kids fishing. Take them to work if you can. Take them and drive them by the house you grew up in. Plant a tree with them. Oh my gosh, we were just talking today about all the trees that we've planted together, and here we are, 30, 27, and 25 years later, looking at these huge trees. And as crazy as it seems, you don't have to own a house or have a piece of property. You can live in an apartment with your son, and you can go find a place to plant a tree, and you guys will be able to look at that forever. So I really think being able to the salvation today for this generation of young people that we're raising is to be able to work hard with them, so they learn how to work hard. And I will tell you this, the young people, I believe, that make the most money in this world today is the kids that are willing to work hard, the kids with work ethic, because there's not a lot of farms anymore. We hired farm kids most of my career. I've had 50 farm kids working for me for the years, and those family farms are kind of gone. So
right.
It's up to us to take our sons and teach them the work ethic that the farmer once did. Get a paper out with them, help them do their paper out, teach them how to manage money. But truly, Chris, I really believe that it's work ethic. It's really, hey, here's a little tidbit. Probably one of the greatest work ethic stimulators that you can do with your kids is, before they leave that bed in the morning, make it with them. Make it Monday and Tuesday with them, and then Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, they got to make it themselves. But I this is something my mom did with me, and I'm so thankful for it. And to this day, I can't leave my bedroom without making my bed. An organized bedroom, this is crazy, an organized bedroom will someday give you an organized checking account, will give you an organized car, will give you an organized office space. When you leave your bedroom in disarray, I've got a younger brother right now who's trying to put his life back into order, and I always tell him, clean your apartment. I call him up, did you clean your apartment today? No, I got this going. You can't organize your life until you clean up your surroundings.
Right.
So that's just a little tidbit. That was a freebie.
Oh, good. Boy, we're getting nickel and dimed here.
No way. I am honored to do this for you guys.
Well, so in summation, work ethic and clean your bedroom. Boom.
In your bedroom.
Secrets to life.
Organize your drawers. Yep. Yep.
Exactly.
Chris,
Pull up,
you better have made your bed this morning.
yeah, pull up your drawers, guys, for some of you out there.
Pull up your drawers. Clean out your drawers. That sounds odd.
Yeah.
Your dresser drawers.
Darrin, thanks so much for coming on here and giving us imparting to us your wisdom on raising boys and just kind of being open and vulnerable with us.
You betcha, Chris. It's a joy.
Thanks.
I'm proud of what you guys are doing. I'm very excited.
Awesome.
I think Levi is 30 years old, and he to and from work he listens to different podcasts. It's we're always learning.
Exactly.
Maybe we
It's
can
awesome
have
what you guys are doing.
That'd be cool.
have Levi on the show.
Yeah, he would love that.
from
He would love to
his
do that.
perspective. Yeah, we'll have the dad's perspective and then the son's.
I know. I'd probably just tease him all the time because I like tease. And he dishes it out pretty good too. I like Levi a lot.
Levi loves Chris. Yeah, they're good together.
Well, awesome. Thanks, Darrin. You guys have been listening to the Fathersphere podcast. We have been listening to Darrin Howell, and it has been an honor to have him on. We'll have some links to some of the articles that I mentioned here. allprodad.com is the website that we referenced in this podcast. And if you're a dad out there and you're listening, you've come to the right place. We want to encourage you to be a better dad, not a perfect dad. There is no such thing, but just better. And we want to encourage each other to be better dads. So drop us a line on Facebook and our social media outlets. You can shoot an email directly to us as well at thefathersphere@gmail.com. And we'd like to hear what you have to say or any advice you have to give, or maybe some topics that you want to talk about. And we'll talk about it on this show. So this has been the Fathersphere. Thank you guys for listening, and be great dads.
Thank you.